Yes, I had to start with this first slide. Okay, now it's not cooperating either. Okay, so I had to do this because, you know, we've had quite a winter and I thought these were funny. So I don't know about everyone else, but we've had plenty of snow around here. I'm sure you all have as well. And I keep trying to tell everyone that, you know, since I'm an optimist, I keep saying, hey, but on the positive note, we haven't had any mosquitoes, or hopefully the mosquitoes won't be as bad this summer. So that's keeping me optimistic and happy throughout this winter. I'm hoping that's actually going to be the case. So yeah, these little snapshots cracked me up. I thought we can't start a presentation without talking about the weather because we're Kansas. So that's where we start off. Okay, so let's get into the content of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do a tag team again between myself, Sherry Massey, and Kristen Jordan Koenig, talking about our usual agenda items. I'll go over some project and imagery update items. Sherry will take over and do GeoMSAG and geospatial call routing update. Kristen will talk about the toolbox and some other updates there. And then I just have a final resources slide. I wanted to point out some new items we have out there and available if everyone's interested. Okay, so just getting into some of the project updates. Things continue to move along. As of today, I think Franklin County is actually getting cut over to the hosted solution today. So that'll put us up to 93 PSAPs, and 3 of those are a backup center. So 93 PSAPs are on the hosted solution for the state. All the PSAPs are using their current authoritative GIS data daily. So I've been trying to keep up with those updates. As you can tell, maybe sometimes at the end of a quarter, since I get so many updates, it takes me a little bit longer, but I do try to push those out within about a week of receiving updates. So I'll probably start working on some of those this afternoon. If you ever have an update that needs to be pushed out immediately, feel free to email me, and I'll go ahead and get that one done right away for you. If I'm in the office, really the only delay is if I'm out of the office and just don't have connection to get it done, but I always try to move those along as quickly as I can. There are now 85 PSAPs now operating off of GeoMSAG. So we're at the very end of converting everyone from traditional MSAG and using your GIS data to create the GeoMSAG. So Sherry's really been kind of organizing and overseeing that entire process. So I thank you all for all your hard work on getting TINs and MSAGs in alignment and GIS data and everything, because that's a huge effort, and that number 85 is very impressive. No small feat there. In addition to that, so in addition to cutting people over the hosted solution, migrating people over to the GeoMSAG, and we also have the PSAPs being cut over to what's called the EZINet. So that's one more building block on our way to full I3 geospatial call routing. All of these are pieces that have to be in place before that can happen. So Sherry will talk a little bit more about where we're at with specifically GeoMSAG and geospatial call routing in her portion, but that's at least the numbers where we're at. So very impressive. We're really moving right along with everything. All right, so one of the main things I wanted to highlight today was give you all an imagery update. As y'all know, the imagery QA was completed thanks to our team of volunteers across the state by the end of it. It was before the December 31st. That was our goal, and I think Kristen said it was 12, 14, several days early. Yep. We got done early, so thank you again for all of your help. Just as a reminder, it is statewide, 1-foot resolution, leaf-off color imagery, and of course, they acquired the entire state, which is really fortunate because consider the winter we're having now. I think the process would have been totally different. So we were very fortunate that we had a very mild winter last year, and they were able to acquire the entire state all in one acquisition. So that's pretty amazing. So right now, Surdex has been reviewing our error calls, and they've reprocessed the western zone and provide those back to us, and we're waiting on the eastern zone. So what we do is we get those back. Really, Kristen takes care of reviewing those and to see what errors what they went ahead and reprocessed, or the error calls that maybe they didn't reprocess, the reasoning why, which could be like, you know, this is a cloud, or whatever they put in the information. So we're just reviewing all those to make sure we don't see anything that was missed or reprocessed incorrectly. So we're waiting on the eastern zone, and they've had a little bit of a delay in processing, but really we're really not behind schedule. We thought the imagery would be available sometime this spring. So that's why I have asterisks around that, because we don't know exactly when, but hopefully soon. Once we get the error calls reprocessed and get to review those, then Certex will be free to go ahead and process the data out for delivery. So, so we're getting very close. So that's very exciting. Once we are ready to have the imagery processed and delivered, we will have the data delivered in Mr. SID, USGS 24K tiles, and state plane north-south projection. The data will also be available in GeoTIFF, USGS 24K quarter tiles, which are state plane north-south. And then as well as we're partnered again with this contract with Baltus, who provides the image service for the imagery. And they will again be providing that service through their credentials and their clients. So if you previously are connecting to those services and have an assigned NG911 imagery username and password, those will remain the same. So the only difference will be we'll send out an announcement when that service is available, and you'll be able to add that to your GIS software or whatever you're using it for. So when all these things are available, we'll certainly be sending out announcements on what's available and how to obtain it. And I'll talk about that actually a little bit more distribution. But first I wanted to mention, as usual, that just a reminder that the imagery is a licensed product. And so basically if you're Kansas state, county, city level government, really anything education, public school, or regents level institutions. Of course, if you're the 911 with the PSAPs, we can distribute to any of you. No problem. The only caveat is if you don't fall in one of these categories, we ask you to actually submit a request and identify who you're doing the work on behalf of. So for example, if you have a engineering group or some other group that would like to access the imagery to do a project on your behalf, they certainly can have access to it. We just need to know who they're doing the work on behalf of, so we can verify that that's in case, in fact, what's happening. So just a little reminder of the licensing. So same type of thing. The 2014 imagery is now out on the DASK website. It's public domain. Anyone can download that anytime. So the new imagery will fall under this licensing agreement. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how we'll be distributing the imagery. So we're setting things up a little bit differently this year. This was Kristen's idea. So instead of making you all come to the DASK website and fill out a data request for the imagery, we know who really wants the data. We know that our primary, our folks that we need to get the data out to immediately are our NG911 GIS data stewards, our NG911 GIS data maintainers, and our county appraiser offices. So what we're going to do is go and process the imagery into county zip files. And based on your location, we will share that information with you. We'll put it in some sort of download protected folder with credentials. And we will send that information to you so that when the data is available, you'll just automatically have a link along with the credentials on how to download that data for your jurisdiction. We're hoping this will kind of speed up the process a little bit for people who want to just grab the data and go as soon as it's available versus having to submit a request, for every single person trying to get a hold of the data. I think the main point here is we ask that you do not share these links or credentials outside of your organization. Of course, if you download it as a GIS professional and your public works department wants it, then absolutely you could share the link, or you could actually just give them a copy of your data. But it's anyone outside of your organization that doesn't fall into that state agency, county government, city government arena. So again, an engineering firm, a advocacy group, a navigation company, whoever it might be, if they're looking to obtain the imagery, we ask them to come to the DASK data request page and actually submit that request. I think the other thing to point out is, so we don't have the 911 imagery available for request yet. We'll add that to the queue so you can request it once the imagery is available. So the other thing is, if you have someone who wants to request something beyond the county, like let's say you are a state agency and you want a region or a different area of the state, you can still submit the request through the DASK data request. If you like to obtain the imagery on a hard drive or a flash drive, you could submit that through the data request page. And was there one other option?
Well, A couple things.
Okay.
Please do not get married to the link idea. We may do this over the FTP site instead. So that way, instead of having to download a whole bunch of zip files, which is super tedious, you can just grab the files, the plain old SIDs off the FTP site and download those. So we're still working out the kinks because all this data is super huge, but we want to make this go as easy as possible. So it might be FTP style. And every county will extend to the border, if not a little bit beyond. So just so you guys know about that. But
yes, thank you. So
yes.
Krista is the mastermind behind this. I'm just, talking about it. So exactly how all this flushes out, we will communicate with you, and you'll have some sort of a way to access the imagery for your county. Put that way.
Yeah.
And then if you're not part of this list, or that doesn't suit your purposes, you can always submit a request through the data request queue, and we'll fill your request that way.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So, and our goal behind it, I mean, although we really like talking to everybody and emailing them, our goal is to make this as easy as possible and not have to handle 100+ hard drives like we did last time, because that was not super fun. So we're trying to make it a little bit easier for everybody involved this time around.
I'm not sure why handling a lot of hard drives isn't fun, but whatever.
To each their own.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was not my idea of fun.
Right. We counted at one time, Brent, through various projects, Brent Miller here in the office had, what was it, like 20-some external hard drives?
It was 50-some.
Oh, 50-some.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're just trying to make the process as efficient and as expedited as possible, so that you can get the imagery, because we're anxious to get it too, so we know that you all are as well. So again, we'll send out announcements of when it's ready. We'll send announcements about how to get a hold of it. We'll send announcements about the service when it's ready, and that'll all be coming hopefully in the next few months. So stay tuned.
And we will also get that updated as soon as possible inside Orca, so that's available, as well as getting the new imagery available in Orion Mapping. And to get that done, however, we have to collaborate with PBD so they can edit everybody's Orion Mapping settings, which can take a while. So thank you ahead of time for your patience, but we'll get everything done in good time.
Okay, so that brings up another good point. See how this works out? We're just in this room by ourselves.
Yeah.
The other point is, then I'm sure your PSAPs will be asking, how quickly will I see this imagery in my call handling mapping software? That's to be determined. There's a few things that depend on how that imagery is going to be updated. One of them is if we decide to upgrade or switch to a different software solution for the mapping, for the call handling mapping. So we certainly have that in mind, and we want to get it out to the PSAPs so it's being used in their 911 calls as soon as possible too. But there's a few other factors in that equation. So once we get all that ironed out, we'll share that information as well. So we're working on it, put it that way. So okay, anything else, imagery? Okay. All right, so I think my next slide, oh yeah, I did have one more imagery slide. So last thing I wanted to say is, I know a lot of the jurisdictions took advantage of local imagery buy-up for the 2018 flying season. So just to let you know that if you're interested in that, it's still available for the 2019 flying season. We talked to Tim the other day, and it's partly weather related that, they just not been had a lot of opportunities to get planes up in the air. So if you are interested, I would contact Tim Donzi immediately, at least within the next week or two, to see if there's a few things that have to get in play, contracts and flight plan and all that good stuff. So I think there is one jurisdiction for sure, maybe two, seriously interested for this flying season. So if you're still considering it, contact him right away, and he will be in touch with more information. The final item I'd like to mention is, so many of you did go ahead and get local buy-up imagery for your local jurisdictions. We are not just automatically going to get a copy of that imagery from CERDEX. So we will be contacting the jurisdictions that did participate in the local buy-up to get your permission to obtain a copy of that imagery. Really, our purpose for that is to support 911 and to make it available in your 911 centers. But we just thought it'd be best to double check with you, make sure we can get a copy. Certex can provide that to us, but they agree that it'd be best if we got your permission before they just gave us that data. So we will be in touch soon to get your permission to get a copy of your local imagery. Okay. All right, with that, the next thing we're going to talk about is the House Bill 2084, and I am going to unmute Sherry and let her talk about that. Okay, Sherry, are you live?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So you guys might remember that last year the Coordinating Council put forward, submitted through the Senate, a Senate bill about making some changes to the Kansas 911 Act. Most relevant to GIS people would be that the GIS standards and the GIS maintenance requirement would be written into legislation. But also as a part of that, raising the 911 fee to help support the higher technological requirements of next generation 911. That bill did not get through the committee. In fact, it didn't actually make the committee floor for lack of time. And so it has been worked on with a variety of people and reintroduced this year. This time it was introduced in the House and will probably be introduced in the Senate fairly soon, but they had a hearing on it on February 5th. And the proposed changes that are in there right now are an increase in the 911 fee from 60 cents a month to $1.03 a month. And right now that 60 cents goes to the 911 centers directly, with the largest centers having a small percentage of the fee that would go to them shaved off and used to support the 911 centers with the lowest populations to make sure they get a minimum amount of $50,000 a year to do their work. That's how it works right now. And with the new bill, if it passes as written, that number would raise to 80 cents. The least populous counties would move from $50,000 a year to $60,000 a year. And then the additional 23 cents would actually go for sustainment of the larger 911 system, the back-end equipment that the 93 PSAPs Eileen talked about earlier are using. Once again, probably more relevant on the GIS side of things, the bill provides the authority to ensure GIS data integrity, moving into legislative, into law, the need to keep the GIS data up to date. It also includes continuation of the legislative requirement that started in 2011 to continue moving the state towards next generation 911, and then adds a couple of positions to the council and a couple of other sort of administrative things. But the real issue for us is that the GIS data and the requirement to maintain that would become law. And I guess the thing for everybody in the state, at least everybody with a cell phone in the state, would be the increase in the fee. So right now, that effort is looking really good. There has been a lot of testimony, a lot of positive testimony, a little bit of neutral testimony, and no opposition testimony at all. So no organization has come out opposed to the bill as it stands. There are a couple of amendments that have been proposed, and we're all learning a lot more about the legislative process than we really want to know. But it is in all likelihood going to come out of committee in the next few weeks and go to the full House, or at least that was the last thing that I heard, and go to the full House for vote. It has a lot of support, and we've had a lot of organizations from the Chiefs of Police and the Sheriff's Association to the Emergency Management Association and several others write supporting letters that have gone a long way to sort of assuring legislative goodwill. So it's an important effort. It's an important effort for showing the importance of GIS, of sort of codifying the importance of GIS, not just to Next Gen 911, but to local government in Kansas in general. and we're really hopeful that it's going to pass this year. And with that, I will move on to the GeoMSAG and geospatial call routing update. Can you head to the next slide? So as Eileen mentioned earlier, 85 PSAPs have switched out their MSAGs for GeoMSAGs. So all of their master street address guide information in the telephone database was removed and replaced with records generated off of the GIS data. This process has gone way faster than I thought it would. And we actually only have a few left. And I anticipate that we're going to be finished with this whole process unless there happens to be a delay in data maintenance stuff. We anticipate being finished with the whole process in April. So like I said, it's gone a lot faster than I thought. We actually started in April of last year. So that would have been converting the entire state, or at least the part of the state on the hosted solution, in 12 months, which is pretty impressive. One of the things that's going to happen in relation to GeoMSAGs is that we are going to be asking for a contact to receive error notifications about GIS data submissions. And if we don't get one, those notifications are going to go to the GIS data maintainer as a stopgap, if you will. So what I'm talking about there is that when you submit data to the Next Generation 911 portal, as you know, validation checks are run, and your data has to pass validation before it's allowed into the system. But what you may not be aware of is that when we receive the data, we have to aggregate it statewide, and then we submit it to another set of validation checks. We're doing everything we can to match our tests that you would see on your end to the tests that we are having to put the data through with West Safety Services, the company that provides that. But we're probably never going to be identical to them. Some of you have already heard from me where I've gone, hey, there's this thing that came up in the test that we're going to need you to fix. Your data will validate to us without you fixing it, but you've got to do something with it eventually. And everybody that I've had contact with has been really good about that, and there have only been a few things. But there's actually a third validation. So you validate with us, we validate with West, and then once that is done, the GIS data has to get into the MSAG. And if any of the changes that you have proposed, like changing a road name or a community name or extending a range or reducing a range, if any of those changes would orphan a telephone number, then a message is going to get created and it's going to be emailed to somebody. And that person is going to have to do something about it. Right now, that person is me. And I get all the emails for all 85 PSAPs, which is kind of like the commercial that used to be there about Rice Krispie treats where the lady has to poof flour on her face to act like it was really hard. Because I say that I'm getting all the emails for all 85 PSAPs, but the truth is I've only had 3 emails in the last year for this. So there are not many errors. Everybody is doing a fantastic job keeping their data up. But eventually I have to not be the one getting those emails. So we're going to be asking, who should that be? For you, as you're considering who should that be locally, it needs to be somebody that has a token to get into 911net or GIS Director. They've got to be able to get into that application because that's what the notification is about. It's saying, hey, there's something in 911net or GIS Director that you need to go look at. 2, it needs to be somebody that either understands addressing and GIS or understands how to communicate effectively with the GIS maintainer. So if you are the maintainer and you are not the person who is going to be receiving these notifications, you need to make certain that you have good communication with whoever that person is. That's the reason right now that if we don't get a contact, we're going to go ahead and have those messages sent to the GIS data maintainer. Now, we haven't asked for these contacts yet. You have a little bit of time here. because there's still some procedural things that we're working out about how quickly those go out, about what the contents of the error messages are. There's several little things that just are not decided yet, but we will be asking you for a contact to receive these notifications. Cool, sorry, I thought I saw a question pop up on the chat. And on the sort of 911 and GIS Director topic, there's going to be a lunch and learn session next week on February 28th from noon to 1 that I am giving about next generation 911 routing problems. And this is not GIS specific information. It is about how phone calls can get lost in the next generation 911 system and what you have to do if that happens. While it isn't GIS specific, if you are a person who has contact with 911 or GIS Director, if someone made you take one of those little tokens, then I highly recommend that you either listen in on the 28th or that you take the time at some point in the future to go back and listen to the recording, which will be available on the Coordinating Council website. Because without going into the ton of detail that I will during the lunch and learn, what's happening is some of the phone numbers in the system either have really, really bad addresses or they don't have any information. They're not actually in the system at all. And the way you report that problem when someone calls 911 and that information did not come in is in 911 or GIS Director. And there is going to be some local research, some local address research, some other things that go into that, but you have to go into one of those two applications to report the problem. So if you have a token, even if you don't think this is going to be your job, I recommend that you take a little while to listen to this discussion, and so you at least have kind of a concept of what the problem is and where it stems from and what your role might be in reporting the errors. So those are the kind of two things that have come up for GeoMSAGs recently that I wanted to be able to pass on to everyone. Can you go ahead to the next slide? All right. So all of this work that we've been doing the last several years, including this GeoMSAG work, the imagery, I mean, everything has been about going geospatial, getting to the point where it is not the emergency service number or ESN that is routing 911 calls through the system, but it's actually plotting on a map for a computer, and the computer is using the map to determine who should get the 911 call. And we are finally there from a testing perspective. Reno County will transition to full geospatial call routing next week. And they have what AT&T calls a 30-day soak. It's a test period where a whole bunch of people are going to be watching every bit of traffic that goes in and out of Reno County to make sure everything works. Assuming this is successful, 30 days after Reno transitions to geospatial, they will start transitioning other PSAPs. And this is the same process that has happened connecting people to the network in the first place. And this process goes fast. They're doing anywhere between 4 and 6 911 centers a week to get them onto the EZINet. And they anticipate that once a PSAP is on the EZINet, getting them to geospatial will be even easier, and they may even move up to 10 to 12 911 centers a week. So we could be through all of this in just a couple of months possibly. So even though I'm saying Reno will go next week and then 30 days, really it could be very fast after that, that the 911 center that you deal with or some of the 911 centers you deal with are going to be geospatial. So let's talk just a little bit about what that means from a GIS perspective. The primary thing it means from a GIS perspective, the primary change you will have to deal with is that they will start using your emergency service boundary layers instead of ESNs and those English language translations or ELTs that we've asked you all to take a look at. They will start using your emergency service boundary layers to return information to the 911 screen. You still have to keep the ESNs in the data, because if everything falls apart from an I3 or next generation 911 perspective, the ESNs are kind of going to be the safety net, what is there to get the call to the right place. But that just means you need to keep them in your road data and in your address data. The emergency service boundaries are going to be what is actually returning police, fire, and EMS response. With that, they gave us a surprise. And that is that the display field in the ESB layers has a reduced character limit for the purposes of geospatial call routing in Kansas. The NENA standard and the Kansas standard say 60 characters. That's the national standard. But the phone software that the hosted solution is using is limited to the first 32 characters in the field. So if you have put Dickinson County's awesome sheriff's department in the field, it's gonna cut a good bit of that off. Or police department for this city, it may cut off the really important bits. So you need to go back for your 911 center and take a look at those emergency service boundary layers and take a look at the display field. And if it has more than 32 characters, consider abbreviating. Now, it's just a free text field, so you can do that in whatever way makes sense to you and most importantly to the dispatchers, so that it's very clear for them what's coming up. But you will need to go back and do that. Now, we are not going to change the Kansas standard because we are in line with the national standard and we're not going to go off of it. This is a technical limitation because of software. But what we are going to do is we are going to add a notice into the validation tests. Now, this is not an error, so it's not going to stop you from validating your data. You don't have to worry about it from that perspective. But a notice will come up if you have more than 32 characters in your display field, and it will warn you that this field will get truncated on the 911 screen if the PSAP is I3 compliant. So it's just kind of a reminder. I recommend that all of you, if your PSAP is on the hosted solution, that you go and take a look at that display field and count your characters. Really, from a GIS perspective, that is it. We are going to continue the uploads of road and address point information. The GeoMSAG will still be there. It will no longer be used for routing, but it will be maintained, and it will be maintained for the purposes of allowing telephone companies to test their address data for their phones before they're submitted to the system. So everything will be cooking pretty much like it was before, and you guys won't have to worry about too much, just that display field at this point. And I hope there are no more surprises, but because Reno County is not just the first place in Kansas, but the first place in the nation to make use of this nationwide ESI net with the Vesta software that we're using, there's always the possibility that there could be other issues come up that nobody anticipated. We don't see any just now. The 32 character limit's the only one anybody is thinking we're going to run into, but please don't kill the messenger if we end up having more going on. Could you go forward again? But that brings us to one outstanding issue that I am going to be communicating with some of you about. So when the conversion happened to the GeoMSAG, there were, in almost every county, some telephone records that did not match the GIS data. And those records were put into a special error status. When we first did this process, we were told that everything would be just fine with those phone numbers. They needed to get fixed, but if they dialed 911, everything would work great. That did not turn out to be true. The address information does display for the dispatchers, but they don't route properly. And quite literally what this has meant is if a call from, we'll say Ulysses, in southwest Kansas is in this special error status, and that phone number happens to call 911, right now, that 911 call would end up in Sedgwick County. Now, the Sedgwick County dispatcher would see the Ulysses address, but what difference does that make? They may not even know what part of the state Ulysses is in, and they certainly don't have the ability to easily transfer all the way back out to southwest Kansas. That's a pretty serious issue. So, and we've run into it several times, way more than anybody thought we would. So we're doing some things on the technical side to make sure that those calls don't go that far away. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with GIS. It has to do with simple network design. And I'm working closely with people from AT&T and with Scott Eckberg and Phil Ryan from the Coordinating Council to rearrange how this network is default routing. That's what it's called. But I need you to do things as well. And that is that if a TN did not match the GIS data and your hands are just thrown up in the air on it, we have got to get it fixed, or we have to get something to happen with it. And I'm going to need your help getting that done. So a list of them was actually sent to the data maintainer right after the GEO-MSAG conversion, and many people got them all fixed. But AT&T is sending me a list of all of the ones that remain again. And I'm going to be hitting you up. But instead of me going, hey, here's your list, this is just a reminder to work on it, we're going to have to hit it, and we're going to have to hit it pretty hard. If there's an address, and this is a lot of the case, and I know that, if there's an address that you just don't know what the address is, the information that's on the telephone record makes no sense. The phone company hasn't been able to tell you physically in the world where the service is, and you don't know what to put on it. That absolutely happens, there's no question, but we still have to figure out something to make sure that that call is going to the right 911 center. So what I'm going to need you to do is take a look at the list that I send you and let me know what phone numbers are in that status, where after all the local research you could possibly do, you just don't know what address to put on it. And I'll work with the phone companies and with you to see what we can do to get placeholder information, if nothing else, county information, if nothing else, attached to that phone record to make sure that it can route properly. And if you have any that just haven't been cleaned up because the phone company has been resistant, or because you skipped it in the list by accident, or whatever, then we're going to need to make sure those get cleaned up. I'm going to need your help. I will do everything I can to assist you. We will put pressure on the phone companies if we need to, but I will be sending you these lists, and I'm going to ask you to look through them and work on them just as soon as you get them. I don't have the report from AT&T yet, but I expect that I will in the next couple of days, and then I'll break it up and start sending it out to people. The good news is nobody has a big list. I know for a fact that I think the biggest list that we had was like 70 phones in one county that even didn't work with the GEO-MSAG initially. And for that county that I'm thinking of, they all got cleaned up very quickly. So you shouldn't have a whole lot to worry about, but what is on that list is critical. I believe that's it, unless I have a slide I forgot about.
I think the next one moves to, yeah, Kristen, but before we move off you, Sherry, we had a question about GIS director training and when that would be available. Did you want to talk to that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So GIS Director training, there isn't a specific scheduled date. If I have a group of people that are interested in GIS Director training, I can get a date scheduled. But there is also recorded training. The recorded training is on what is called the IUP, or the website you sign into in order to go to GIS Director. And I can give you some instructions. They're unfortunately long, of how to get to that recorded training so you could see the other session. We also have a document, and if I am not mistaken, that document is finished and just sitting on my computer, so I apologize to you guys for that. But we have a document that covers the basics of what you need to do with GIS Director. And when this call is over, I will make sure and get that information to Eileen and to Lori Alexander, so it can be put out on the Coordinating Council website and the DASC site for you guys to download. It has a basic explanation of the functions that, after discussions with AT&T and with West Safety Services, we believe you're going to have to do in GIS Director most of the time. It doesn't cover 100%, but it covers about 95% of what you're going to have to do there, with some screenshots and some general instructions as to why you would use that screen and how to interpret what you see there. So if we have people that are interested in a live training session, send me an email or send Eileen an email and she will let me know. And I will get that organized with West and get it arranged. They are very long sessions, and West is not interested in making them shorter. And if you are one of the people who sat through the last one, you'll understand what I'm saying there. You have very little that you actually have to do inside GIS Director, but they want to explain every function and they want to take a long time to do it. And part of the reason we did the document, and the reason that they're not willing to do the training on, say, a regular monthly basis. So they are doing it at our request. Just let me know if you would like it live and we'll get it scheduled.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sherry.
Mm-hmm.
Now we will switch over. I'm going to mute Sherry again. And we're going to switch over to Kristen, who's going to talk about topology and toolbox. Mm-hmm.
So this first section we've gone through before. It was in the last quarterly webinar, but just as a big heads up that ESB polygon topology notices will be switching to errors as of Q2. So they will prevent successful submissions starting in June 2019. And this means no gaps, no overlaps inside your polygon topology. So for example, here's Dickinson County. If you're looking at it bird's eye view, it looks great. But if you jump in a little bit further, you can see there's a gap in between some of the ESB boundaries. But wait, there's more. There's actually an overlap as well. And these are all adjustments I made to Sherry's data because as it was very, very pretty. So I did this with a copy of her geodatabase. So if you run it through the toolbox, as of right now, you'll be getting notices about what's going on with the topology. So these we're putting in there so you can have plenty of heads up to be able to check them and fix things before they become errors in June. So in ArcMap, you can bring in the topology and the ESB layers, activate a activated topology toolbar and start an edit session. And after validating the topology, this is what things will look like. The areas that have gaps or overlaps will be highlighted. And in the error inspector down below, you can see exactly what's going on and work through topology issues. So fixing it, making sure vertices match up exactly between features. During an edit session in ArcMap, you can always run topology again and again and again, make edits, run again, as much as you need to. Beware of validating the full extent of the data versus current extent. If you're just validating the current extent and you figure that's good, you may be missing things that are elsewhere in the county. And use the error inspector. It's very helpful. So several people have reported that then there is a gap, a topology gap that appears on their county boundary. And basically just inside the error inspector, mark it as an exception inside ArcMap. And after this, the topology, it won't be reported as an error anymore in the topology, once it is marked as an exception. If you have any questions about that, I went through this pretty fast, but feel free to shoot me or Sherry Massey an email, and then we'll get that fixed up. So moving on to the toolbox update. The latest version came out in late January of this year, and there were a few new enhancement tools added. The first one is a road ESN checker. Inside the road centerline file, there's a field for ESNL and ESNR, identifying which ESN number is on the left and right sides of the street, respectively. And the tool will validate those values against where the ESZ boundary ESN number is actually reporting. So it's doing a spatial comparison between what the data says and in both the road center lines and the ESZ boundary. So if you're having some issues with all those things agreeing, that's a good tool that you can run to check, make sure everything is spatially making sense. And then another enhancement tool is essentially adding or verifying all the topology rules that exist now. This just makes sure that whatever you have in your geodatabase is exactly the same thing that we've got, and it adds topology rules as necessary inside the tool. This was requested by a county who maintains their data in ArcSCE and then exports it to a geodatabase, and every time they do an export, the topology was blown away. So this essentially was created so you can create the topology on the fly if you need to. But then I figured, you know, we all need to be on the same page with the same topology, so this tool ensures that that happens. Other improvements in the toolbox, there's now a required ESB naming convention. We've had a few bobbles with that, but I think it should be pretty stable now. Also a check to make sure that any address points marked yes for GeoMSAG are not also duplicated in the road center line. They want uniqueness, not just between address points or just between road center lines, but uniqueness between everything that's gonna be a GeoMSAG. So these will come back, I believe, as errors. So just be aware that some of those may pop up, and don't get too surprised if they show up. Also made some improvements to both the add KSPID tool, that is to add the parcel number to your address points, and also the NG KSPID check for parcels had an issue, got that fixed, and another random layer error that some people experienced. Looking ahead, I had already sent my slides off to Eileen by the time we heard about the ESB display field. So looking ahead, the toolbox will check the character length of your display field. And so just know that you might start seeing those after the next toolbox is released. The ESB polygon topology notices will become errors, and other developments will depend on what we hear back from people. So can you actually exit out really fast? I'll add the, you can do a select by attributes inside ArcMap on your own to see if your display field is too long. Oh, it's not letting me do that. So if in a select by attribute, you use this expression, that's the magic expression that you can use in select by attributes to see if you have any records that are too long, essentially. this is also pretty nifty expression that you can use for like anything that you need to do to count character length. But here's the one that you would use to check out your ESP boundaries for this specific issue.
We had a quick question come through the chat.
Oh yeah, I write the tool in 10.6.1, so it'll be compatible with 10.6. The real problem that I have is people who are still working in like 10.2 and 10.3. I know some of you have to for third-party things, but if you're just hanging on just cause, please upgrade. It'll make my life easier.
I think she's looking at me too when she says that. I'm a little behind on that.
If you use ArcMap on a regular basis.
Yeah. I use PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think that's one head. Is that the right button? I don't use PowerPoint very often.
Oh, see? I'm helping you now.
Yeah, there we go.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, great. All right, so yeah, continue to submit questions in the chat if you have something, because that's handy to just get those answered for you right away. So I just wanted to point out, kind of wrap things up here, a few new resources that are available. The first one is through the 911 portal. We've added something on the menu bar that's called GIS FAQ. So it stands for GIS Frequently Asked Questions. And we found that, especially at CAM or when we're at the Kansas APCO conference or different conferences, we get some really great questions in person. We thought, if someone's asking us this question, someone else must have it as well. So we've started collecting the questions, and as well as the answers. So Sherry and I kind of shared responsibility of answering those questions. And those are now archived and available under this GIS FAQs menu item. There's also the option to submit a new question. So feel free to submit something, because if you're thinking about it, I'm sure someone else is. We'd love to add that to our inventory of questions and answers we have. So feel free to check that out. And again, that's on the 911 portal. And if you're a GIS maintainer or steward, I think you can see that. And if someone wants to see it that doesn't have permissions to see it, let us know and we can expand those roles on the portal. The other resource I wanted to point out is something that Kristen put together, which is called the Kansas Next Gen 911 GIS Post-Processing Steps. And
super exciting.
She loves when I say, hey, I want to put a document about this. All right, oops, what is the deal here? Okay, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. So I want to scoot over here real quick. So on the DASC website,
you might need to share that one.
Oops, hold on a second. Let me see if I've shared this. I thought I shared my whole, I'm just sharing my whole desktop at this point. So hopefully everyone can see. I don't need to see my email and everything, but okay. So here's the DASC website. When you go into initiatives and then click on Next Generation 911, I'm sure all of you are familiar with this, but we have all the different tabs of information here. If you go to Standard Tools and Policies, this document is under Policies and Document. I've already pulled it up here. So what it is we had a lot of people ask, what exactly happens to my data after I submit it? I know that you process it out for Vesta Locate, but what else do you do to make sure it's NENA compliant before it goes to EGDMS, or what else do you have to do to it? So there's a lot of, this is all Kristen's scripting again, a lot of attribute concatenation or renaming or changing of file format and things like that. So we thought, just to keep it as transparent as possible, Kristen put this document together for your reference. She'll continue to update it based on tweaks that are made. So sorry, I'm making everyone a little dizzy here, but if you scroll down, that's, so you see the different features, and then like EGDMS processing, there's different steps we go through. So feel free to browse through this document and let us know if you have any questions. And like I said, we'll keep it updated as processes change, or if they have to change based on geospatial call routing. So I want to point that out. And then if I go back one more here. Also, just to reiterate, so Sherry mentioned the GeoIMSAG and GIS Director document. That's almost ready for release. So once that is ready, I will post it on the 911 Coordinating Council website, the DASC website, and also send out an announcement, because I think it's a great document kind of summarizing what's GeoIMSAG and what's GIS Director and what do I need to do now that that's all in place. So I will send out an announcement when that is available. And then the final thing is just letting you know that working on putting together dates for the 2019 round of GIS Data Steward and GIS Data Maintainer certification classes. If you've already attended a class in person, it's not mandatory that you come again, but Sherry does always update that content for the current activities for the 911 project. So we'd love to see you at an event, and then we will announce the dates for those as well, probably sometime this spring. So the final item I had there was just reminding you of the different resources available. There's the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council website, where I try to keep all the GIS information updated there, as well as on the DASC Initiative's Next Gen 911 webpage. So with that, I'm just going to escape because I lost my chat. So let me see if there's any other questions or comments. Okay, I don't see anything else coming through the chat. So with that, we are right on time. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I will put a copy of the slides as well as the recording of this presentation as soon as it's done processing and ready out on these two web pages I have highlighted here. So, okay, looks like we have one more question asking about the Lunch and Learn that Sherry's doing. That is sent out through, I can send that information out to anyone who's interested. Lori Alexander, the 911 liaison, sent that information out, so the connection details, but just shoot me an email if you want the information for the Lunch and Learn next week about the call reroutes. Just send me an email and I will send you that connection information. Okay, with that, I think we are completed for the day. So thank you for joining us, and everyone stay warm, and we'll let you know when the next user group is this spring. Thanks, everybody.